Howdy folks, welcome to Live at the Lazy T Ranch. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Chris Wilson's doing the video. We continue to have technical difficulties here, but it's the last week of July. It's hot and humid at the ranch as one would expect. Today I want to talk about some American history, particularly Abraham Lincoln and the history of the Lazy T Ranch. I'm told that there's a coin shortage in the country today. I'm not sure why, what that has to do with the pandemic, but I'm told that there's a coin shortage. I think most of those missing coins are in the seat cushions of my couch, actually. But I have a coin here today to show you. This is a brand new 2020 penny. And when kids come out to the ranch, I sometimes like to show them a penny and ask the kids, who is pictured on the penny? And if they answer Abraham Lincoln, then I give them a penny. Well, since you're watching virtually, you're out of luck. Sorry, I can't give you the penny. But I use that because I want to connect everyday life with the life of Abraham Lincoln, this masterful figure in American history. As a history buff, I am really fascinated by Lincoln. Lincoln considered to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, U.S. president ever. And why is he considered our greatest president? Well, I think because he took a stand for human freedom, he saved the Union, and he gave his life ultimately for the cause. But there are other elements of Lincoln's life which I really find interesting and connect to values that I find personally important. For example, he was born in a log cabin in Kentucky. He grew up on a farm in southern Indiana. He moved to the great state of Illinois, where he became a country lawyer and served as a congressman from Illinois and was elected as the first Republican president of the United States. People think of the Civil War, of course, rightly so, but there were also some very significant pieces of legislation which passed and were signed into law by President Lincoln that, again, are very important to me. For example, he signed the Morrill Act, which authorized land-grant universities to establish them all across the country, including Kansas State. He signed the first Homestead Act, which made it possible for homesteaders to come west and settle the frontier. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation and was instrumental in the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which outlawed slavery. He signed legislation creating the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which he called the People's Department, the agency where Chris would work in the Secretary's office years later. So it's all part of the really interesting history of Abraham Lincoln. If that's history of Lincoln, how about history of the Lazy T Ranch? I've already talked on previous segments about how Enoch Persons was the original homesteader here, about how he traveled from New England by train to Fort Leavenworth and took a team of oxen and a wagon right here to the Lazy T Ranch, where he would homestead here in the Kansas River Valley. He was affiliated with the New England Emigrant Aid Company, which was sent to make sure that Kansas would become a free state. So Enoch Persons settled here, expanded his farm, expanded his family. He needed to buy land, and there came a unique opportunity because Congress in 1855 had passed a law which made it possible for the U.S. government to grant land to widows of soldiers instead of a pension. So instead of giving a cash pension to the soldier or his widow, they would give title to land out in the West. Imagine that, the U.S. Congress having budget troubles. So this was their plan. Instead of giving cash, they would grant title to the land out in the western United States, which then the widow could sell and realize the cash. And so that's exactly what happened in 1862. And Enoch Persons bought land that belonged to Ann Wright, who was the widow of James Wright, who had been in Captain Whiteside's company of the Illinois militia in the War of 1812. How do we know all this? Well, for one thing, we have here the original certificate from the U.S. Government General Land Office, which cites all of this, explains about Ann Wright, James Wright, and Enoch Persons purchasing this 120 acres. And this is the original certificate. There's the seal, and it's signed by who? None other than Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States. Is this Lincoln's original signature? I've looked online. To me, it looks authentic. I have to think that there was probably a clerk or someone who inscribed Lincoln's name. But this is the original certificate which grants title to that 120 acres. And today, the site where I'm standing today, we believe is part of that original 120 acres granted from the U.S. government that ended up in Enoch Person's hands, and it's part of the Lazy T Ranch. This original certificate we're very proud of. It was recently reframed by Jan LaGrange of Manhattan. A copy hangs in the Cowboy Cafe where it can be viewed by the public. It's all part of the fascinating history of Abraham Lincoln and the West and the Lazy T Ranch. So let me finish up this segment with a poem I wrote called Lincoln and the Lazy T. Abraham Lincoln was our 16th president, one of the greatest of all time, as it is evident. He stood firm to save the Union, gave the slaves emancipation, and lost his very life in service to the nation. From his speeches to his Gettysburg Address, his thoughts could inspire us in the words he could express. Now, 160 years later, we remember with great joy this plain-spoken country lawyer who came from Illinois. And we find in the history, as we read in this way, that he signed a land grant for the place we find ourselves today. According to the history into which we've come to delve, land came to a soldier's widow from the War of 1812. Enoch Persons was the one who bought that widow's land. His family was growing. His family needed to expand. 5 generations later, his family sold the place. The buyers named it Lazy T, and that is still the case. Now our children are our family's 3rd generation to make their home right here on this historic ranch location. As admirers of Lincoln throughout our family tree's branch, we treasure his signature in the history of the Lazy T Ranch. Folks, thanks for joining us. We host live at the Lazy T Ranch every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Share, like, and comment. Be safe, be well. Happy trails, and God bless.